Compulsory education in the U.S. So in this video, we will look over what compulsory education is, the history of compulsory education in the U.S., historical and current perspectives, the strengths and weaknesses of such policy, and the effects of compulsory education on schools and the teaching and learning of students. Compulsory education just means the government requires people to receive formal education for a set period of time. Most countries on Earth have compulsory education laws, but the ages, duration, and institution types vary. Now, the U.S. does not have one federal law concerned with education. Rather, each of the 50 states has its own government with unique laws and boards of education. All states have compulsory education laws, and on average, children between the age of 6 and 16 are required to complete a state-approved educational program. Most states impose fines for failure of attendance, but parents can be subject to legal charges and in some states, short-term jail sentences. For simplicity's sake, I will talk about my home base of Virginia State and go over its compulsory education laws. In Virginia, every child between their 5th birthday on or before September 30th of the school year and their 18th birthday must partake in some form of formal education. And some form is rather broad today. It includes public, private, charter, alternative, online, religious, and homeschooling. All need to be approved by the Virginia Board of Education, and that can get tricky, but there's a wide variety of options for students. Virginia has quite a few exemptions from compulsory education attendance. Some include a bona fide religious training, a medical issue. Because Virginia is rather large and rural, simply living too far away from any school and without transportation, is at least 16 years old and works at least part-time through a vocational program, or any other reason approved for by the Virginia Board of Education. Based on an 180-day school year, missing 18 days of school is considered chronic absenteeism and comes with repercussions just as truancy. So having an exemption is required, albeit tricky. The first law requiring children to attend school was passed in Massachusetts in 1852. Many states followed, but enforcement for the most part was non-existent. Prior, schools were private or through religious institutions and required tuition most people couldn't pay. Many, if not most students, worked either with their parents or the fields or the factories, and the income was important, so compulsory education wasn't widely supported. The idea behind a state-run public school was mostly to assimilate the boom of immigrant children, teach them English, and redirect them from their immigrant values. But as the century went on, child welfare activists and labor leaders pushed for compulsory education laws to keep the growing number of children out of dangerous factory jobs and give them a chance at education at all. It wasn't until 1917 the last state, Mississippi, passed a compulsory education law. All 50 states had mandatory attendance policies, but there wasn't a set age range. In 1932, federal legislation regarding child labor solidified the American acceptance of compulsory education and school attendance for all children. Throughout the 20th century, the Supreme Court handled many cases that shaped the U.S. concept of compulsory education, giving states authority to police attendance, include non-public schools for compliance, and exceptions for religious exemptions. Today, many people support compulsory education as it demands the inclusivity of people with disabilities, ESL students, and low-income families. It provides services to children that otherwise children might not have access to, such as free lunch, counseling, and early intervention services. School attendance fosters social development and keeps children out of trouble. Research from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that there is a direct correlation between the level of education students achieve and their economic future. Compulsory laws keep children in school until graduation. Critics argue not all students thrive in traditional education environments, and mandatory attendance stifles creativity, innovation, and student interest. Forced attendance can contribute to adverse behaviors. Attendance issues have legal repercussions that disproportionately affect poorer families. Government interference is not appreciated by many. Some argue school subjects children to social engineering, much in the same way schools once sought to influence immigrant children. Compulsory education laws have overseen that schools are available to everyone. Compulsory education has ensured equality of opportunity and access to a multitude of services. Children who must attend school will most likely graduate, which leads to more opportunity in adulthood. It's difficult to assess learning without standardized testing. Scores are often tied to funding, so the pressure is high to conform to state standards. This can make learning seem rigid, boring, and counterintuitive. Trained and competent teachers will always be in demand so long as education is mandated. The need to work with such a broad spectrum of students, many teachers struggle with high workloads and burnout. However, with so many schooling alternatives, evolving theories of education, such as flipped classrooms, block schedules, growth mindset, online learning, and integrated tech, many more students and teachers will find their stride in schooling to ensure a rewarding education for everyone.